Support comes from the Arizona Inn, a four-diamond, family-owned historic resort hotel and restaurant on Elm Street near the U of A. Information is at arizonainn.com.
Hello everyone, I'm Tucson Weekly senior writer Jim Ninsel, and we're here to talk Zona Politics. Joining me today is Tucson City Councilman Steve Kozachik, a Democrat who is seeking his third term representing Midtown Ward 6 this year. Steve, thanks for joining us here on Zona Politics.
Glad to be here and glad to see you back on the air. It's great stuff.
The council is asking voters to give you a half-cent per dollar sales tax to help out with police, fire, and roads. It's going to last for 5 years. Over that 5 years, raise $250 million, 40% to roads, 30% to fire, 30% to the police, right. And make the case for a yes vote.
Well, it's an investment in the community. Very frankly, this is a situation where we haven't bought police and fire vehicles since before the recession. If you see a cop car drive by you right now, chances are 6 or 7 out of 10 that the thing has well over 100,000 miles on it, and those are tough miles. Paramedic trucks, the chances are 9 out of 10 that they have over 100,000 miles. Again, when you call 911, you want to make sure that you either get a cop or you get a paramedic to your house. So that's an important investment in the community, making sure we have a 21st century police force and fire department. As far as the roads are concerned, we have Prop 409, that's the property tax that the voters passed 4 years ago. We have 1 more year on it. Once that expires, we're going to be looking for ways to continue to fund the road repair that 409 has been doing at $20 million a year. This percentage of the half cent that we're asking for will be that funding source going forward. I probably would have crafted the thing a little bit differently. I would have preferred that we not sunset the roads piece, because let's not kid each other. In 5 years, we will still need funding for road repair. Even if we had finished everything, when this thing sunsets, we'll be ready to go back and start fixing the roads that we fixed 5 years ago with the $409. We can't rely, though, on the state. Clearly, they've been cutting our HERF dollars, our gas tax money, and they're not inclined to increase that either. So, and also as far as the RTA is concerned, they will be coming up for a reauthorization probably sooner than later, although they don't need to until 2025, but they're having some bonding problems themselves. That could be another funding source, and frankly, 4 years ago, I was proposing that they do that and add road repair to a piece of the RTA. Right now, it doesn't cover any of it. But my sense is that we can't wait, and we can't rely on other people to take care of the infrastructure needs that we have in the city of Tucson. So I'm hoping that the voters consider this to be an investment in our community, a long-term investment. Every time we talk to the business community, it's fix the roads and make sure we have a strong school system, which is something that Phoenix needs to deal with, but also make sure we have a strong public safety component to the community. This Prop 101 will achieve all of that.
And switching gears a little bit, there's a proposal to build some student housing at 4th Avenue and University Boulevard. It's for the Honors College. There are folks in the West University neighborhood who are concerned about this and the impact on their historic neighborhood. Talk a little bit about where this proposal is.
This is problematic from a number of standpoints. First of all, the template that the university is using. What they are doing is they're crafting a ground lease with a private student housing company to come in and effectively take the property out of private ownership and put it under the umbrella of the state. When you do that, a few things happen. Number one, it pulls it off the property tax rolls, and that's 6 figures a year to the city of Tucson. We'll also be losing impact fees. Those are the dollars that a developer pays to pay for things like roads, the impact they'll have on roads, the police, the fire, the parks in the area, the maintenance and upkeep that these new residents are going to have on the surrounding area. So from strictly a fiscal standpoint, it's going to take it off the tax rolls, and we're going to lose the impact fee dollars. More importantly to me, though, is the manner in which this is being done. When the University of Arizona or any public entity goes in and makes an offer to a private developer and says, I'll buy your property, and by the way, I'll pay you lease payments in perpetuity to take that thing off the tax rolls, it bypasses the public rezoning process, which brings all the parties to the table. It goes in front of a zoning examiner. Both parties make their case. And the zoning is either then approved or disapproved, but if it's approved with conditions that reflect that public conversation. The way the university is doing this, none of that public conversation, none of that public process is going to happen. That's problematic for this site. It's even more problematic for me, though, because this model could be replicated anywhere in the community. The university goes out and finds a willing private property owner and says, I'll buy your property from you. I'll pay you lease payments over time. And as long as what they are building falls under that kind of general umbrella of an educational use, they so far can get away with it. So you can go build yourself a 10-story student housing project in the middle of a residential area because it's exempt from the city rezoning processes. So we have the city attorney looking at the memorandum of understanding already. Frankly, I think it's a little bit clunky and I think there are some holes in it. But the two other documents that we have to look at, the linchpin of this deal, are the terms and conditions of the ground lease and then the facilities management agreement, because those documents will show how the money's changing hands. If American campus communities were doing this on their own and going through the regular rezoning process, they would go through that process, but what they would also be doing is receiving rent payments every month from the students. I mean, that's how they make money. What the university is doing is they're laundering those rent payments and paying them back to ACC, American Campus Communities, in the form of a lease. And so I've got the city attorney looking at that and seeing whether or not this passes legal muster. If the university moves forward with this, I think it will be an absolute train wreck from the standpoint of public relations and integrity. They're about to go out and redo their campus master plan and invite the community into the conversation. The Honors College is outside of the planning boundary already, and so number one, we're building outside the planning boundary, and number two, we, the university, are cutting this deal. I think it's going to ruin them from the standpoint of public confidence in their word, and I think they're making a big mistake.
But not much the city council can do about it.
Well, we'll see, because I'm not convinced that the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, I'm not sure that the terms of the ground lease are legal. The university is taking the dollars and paying them back to ACC in the form of a lease payment. I think there's a hole there that the city can step up to the plate and say, this is a rose by any other name. These are private sector dollars that you're funneling through the state institution back to the private developer. And I think that there's a hole there that the city can challenge them legally on. I hope it doesn't come to that. We've got a new university president coming in on the 1st of June. I hope he looks at this model and says to himself, the first thing I don't want on my plate is a public relation disaster, and let's just tell ACC, you guys, we're pulling back from this MOU. You go through the rezoning process. We'll meet you at the end of it. We love the Honors College concept, and frankly, from the standpoint of the surrounding neighbors, it's another 1,000 beds in the area, so it's not going to be an inconsequential impact on the surrounding area, and the roads, and the parks, and the police, and the fire component that I mentioned before. So this is a big deal, and if this template moves forward, every neighborhood in the community ought to be concerned about it, because it wouldn't apply just to the university. It would be any public entity. It could be TUSD, maybe the tribe, anybody who could come in and say, this use fits under our public purpose, and therefore we're going to start buying out private property owners all over the community. And so we need to get in front of it and try and force this back into the zoning process, the formal zoning process, keep it on the tax rolls, and make sure that public institutions don't have the ability to do this going forward.
You know, the city of Tucson is in a lawsuit right now over the city's policy of destroying some firearms that are seized by the police rather than auctioning them off. Why does the city choose to destroy some of these firearms?
Look, we've had a policy in place since 2005 for over a decade, and the policy quite simply says that when we get property, we the city get property, whether it's a table, a car, or a firearm, or a clock. We're not in the business of being eBay for the public sector. We will try and find the owners of the property. We'll go through, we'll track them down in terms of serial numbers, whether it's a stolen car, make sure it's not involved in a crime, any kind of a legal issue. When it comes to a gun, the same thing is true. We will try and find the owners. We will run checks on it to make sure that the thing wasn't involved in a crime. We do sell some guns over the internet. We sell hunting rifles, shotguns and those kinds of things. But if we get a gun through the court system that was used for evidentiary purposes, an AR-15 or some semi-automatic weapon that doesn't have any business being sold through the internet back into the private sector, or more importantly, if we get a gun that somebody simply comes to us and says, I want this taken out of circulation, which is exactly what happened when I did the gun buyback a few years ago. People were walking up, trading their weapons that they wanted out of circulation for a Safeway gift card. When those conditions happen, then we ought to have an opportunity, instead of being the arms dealer for the state, we ought to have an opportunity to honor that request and take them out of circulation. So that's one piece of this lawsuit that we're serious about. The second piece is that we're a charter city. Our charter is our Constitution. It's not something that the City Council concocted last week. This is something that the voters approved over 100 years ago. We have fought to protect and preserve our elections process through the courts. We've had those affirmed. Our charter prevailed. We believe that the destruction of property, whether it's a table or a gun, is a local decision. When Mark Brnovich, the Attorney General, argued before the Supreme Court that this was a statewide issue, he said two things. This is a statewide issue because, number one, the state has to protect the Second Amendment, and if the city destroys guns, it takes more of them out of circulation, which increases the cost of guns, and that fights against the Second Amendment, which to me is absolutely tortured logic and just foolish. Our Attorney General made that argument in front of the state Supreme Court. He also said that the state has to oversee the policing powers of the state, and he said that the more guns in circulation, the safer the public is, and therefore is a state issue for how the city of Tucson deals with guns. I think both of those are foolish. He made the arguments. We argued our case in front of the state Supreme Court, and we're waiting for that decision to come back to us now.
Because this is the test of a law that any lawmaker can file a complaint with the Attorney General's office and say that you're violating a state law in some way, and you'd lose a considerable amount of all your state shared revenues.
SB 1487 is the law that you're talking about. It is the basis on which this suit came to us. It is fundamentally unconstitutional. We also made that argument in front of the state Supreme Court. It is the legislature telling the executive what to do. It's the executive telling the judiciary what to do. It's the treasurer taking dollars, the state shared revenues, that were legislatively approved without going back and changing the legislation. It steps all over separation of powers, and it forces a jurisdiction to post a bond where 6 months of their last 6 months of state shared revenues, for us that would be $60 million. In the olden days, that would be called a filing fee, which are fundamentally unconstitutional. So it violates due process as well. I would hope that even with this Ducey-packed state Supreme Court, that they recognize the constitutional flaws in that and come back and say, not only is that unconstitutional, but the city charter should prevail, and so on both of those bases, that they'll just throw this out.
Rio Nuevo is now involved with some of the planning for the widening of Broadway between downtown and Country Club. What do you hope to see Rio Nuevo be able to step in and do here as this project gets underway? The
city of Tucson, we just passed about 3 weeks ago a new adaptive reuse ordinance, and what that does is it gives private sector builders an opportunity to go in and find small historic buildings and change the uses of them. If it used to be an insurance company, now it's turned into a donut shop or whatever it is, but not have to go through and make all the code changes that would otherwise make that a prohibitive transaction. The city of Tucson right now, as you point out, we've got this RTA project that we're going to widen Broadway. I've fought against it since the thing came up. It's moving forward. And so what we've finally done is we've gotten Rio Nuevo in the mix, and Rio Nuevo has some tools that they can use that the city can't. They're not subject to the state constitutional gift clause. They can have conversations with private sector developers that we can't. And so this gives an opportunity for the city to go in and buy a property that would otherwise lose all of its parking and access points, and Rio Nuevo can then walk up to that private property owner and say, here's how we can help you in terms of loaning you money, working out cross-access agreements, new parking arrangements for 2 or 3 property owners in a row. Things that we can't do as a public entity, but they can do. We do have one property that's problematic for me right now, the old Maderas Gallery at Cherry and Broadway. The city is going to clip the front part of that thing. And so last week, we had the city manager send out a memo that say, because it's getting clipped by the new road alignment, we're going to demolish the building. So I threw a flag on that. I said, no. This is exactly the kind of situation that Rio Nuevo ought to be able to step into and say, we might lose the front 10% of the building, but let us go and talk to private sector operators out in the community and say if they want to adaptively reuse this other 90%. So this is a good example of a possible opportunity where we might be able to step in through Rio Nuevo and say, let's find a new use for this particular property, and all up and down the Sunshine Mile, the corridor between Euclid and Country Club.
You know, the city has been working towards establishing what's called structured balance for the budget, so that you don't have to sell off property or use settlement for a lawsuit or find change in the couch cushion or what have you. And you're pretty close, a few $1 million off. Are we going to see some cuts in this year's city budget to get there?
The last fiscal year was the first time I've voted in favor of our budget since I started doing this in 2009, because it's the first time we've had a structurally balanced budget from an operational standpoint. Now, when we started this conversation, we were talking about the capital needs. Those are a different piece of the conversation. So operationally, we're within about $9 million, again this year, of structurally balanced. We're not going to be laying people off. We're not going to be dipping into the cushions in the couch to find the pennies. What we're going to be doing is restructuring. And this will give us an excellent opportunity to start working with the county on how to consolidate court services, maybe work out different deals in terms of how the parks are operated. We've already got a new deal cut with between them and TMC on how we're operating and funding the Pima Animal Care Center. So this is an opportunity now when you're challenged with finding $9 million instead of 40. So let's preserve the employee base that we have now. When I started doing this, we had about 6,000 employees. We're down to about 4,500. So no more cuts on the employees. But consolidating services with the county, I'm not talking about regional government, but I'm talking about finding efficiencies, because if we're both doing the same thing, whether it's HR, IT, the kinds of things that we're doing with the parks and maintenance, let's find a way to be more efficient with that. And I think that we're going to get there. We have a new city manager working very effectively with Chuck Huckleberry. I think everybody in the council and everybody in the Board of Supervisors, who, by the way, are also facing their own financial challenges as a result of some things that came at them from the state. We're all in a position now where let's all pull the rope in the same direction and get out of this thing together without cutting services, without raising taxes and fees, and without laying employees off.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but City Councilman Steve Kozachik, thanks so much for coming in and joining us here on Zona Politics.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Jim.
All right, we will be right back with Tucson Metro Chamber President and CEO Mike Varney.
Zona Politics is made possible with the generous support of the Loft Cinema, Tucson's independent movie theater. The Loft features independent, foreign, and documentary films, cult classics, discussions with filmmakers, and much more, including the Loft Film Fest in November. The Loft is located at 3233 East Speedway Boulevard. Showtimes can be found at loftcinema.org. Support for Zona Politics is provided by Hotel Congress in historic downtown Tucson. More information at hotelcongress.com and 622-8848. The Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce serves the business community in the bilingual, bicultural region of the Arizona-Sonora border and is a proud media partner with Zona Politics. Learn more at TucsonHispanicChamber.org.
All of these young people from the community come together, actually get up and do something.
We can do anything!
I think we've attracted a lot of people that are super passionate.
We're here at the No Ban, No Wall protest.
If you come out of college, you have this experience, you know how things run, you have a huge leg up.
People who have ideas and who are dreamers, you know what I mean, who really want to get themselves out there. I think that they should come here.
Zona Politics is hosted by Tucson Weekly. Zona Politics is.
And we're back with Zona Politics. I'm your host, Jim Ninsel, and joining me now is Tucson Metro Chamber President and CEO Mike Varney, who recently announced he'd be leaving the chamber after 6 years at the top. Mike, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Jim. Thanks so much.
So, talk a little bit about where the business community was when you arrived here and where it is now.
Well, how much time do we have? Let me ask you that. The business community is, I think, where the business community has always been. Businesses want to grow. They want to create jobs. They want to do what they can to contribute to the community. I think where the business community is right now can best be defined as where the business community in partnership with the public sector is right now. There's been a significant change there, at least in my opinion. When I got here 6 years ago, there wasn't a lot of dialogue. There wasn't a lot of trust. There wasn't a lot of cooperation between the public sector and the private sector. I think that's come a very, very long way for a lot of different reasons. But today we have very high levels of cooperation between the city, the county, and to a degree the state with local businesses. We're in a very good period right now. We've seen some enormous interest in Tucson here recently by some big name brand companies that are planting their flag here. Local companies are in the process of growing and expanding. Raytheon just announced 2,000 new jobs that they're adding with their new addition. So the economy has picked up a lot of steam here in southern Arizona. It doesn't mean our job is done, but it does mean that we're in a much better place now than we were 6 years ago. You
do hear a lot about the county, the city, they're not business friendly. Reputations take a long time to turn around. Do you think that is turning around?
I don't hear that so much anymore. Used to hear that a lot. Don't really hear that so much anymore. We've got a city and a county government that are now, in my opinion, embracing economic development, embracing the need to make sure that job creators get a chance to create jobs, helping them in a number of different ways with incentives and high levels of cooperation, so that that anti-business, that not business-friendly mantra is just something I don't hear much anymore.
You've been a big advocate for better schools, better education. What do you think the state needs to do to improve education here?
Well, solve their own riddle. A couple of years ago when Governor Ducey was here in Tucson, he and I had a little sidebar conversation after the announcement of the Uber's decision to partner with the U of A on autonomous cars. And the governor said something that I've remembered to this day and probably always will remember, and that is that economic development is his highest priority. He said, he even went so far as to say that if we can fire up the state's economy, it solves almost all of his other problems. And I buy into that. Let's rev up our state economy. To rev up our state economy, we're going to have a very qualified workforce to do that. And the pipeline for a qualified workforce is education. I want to see the day that the legislature, the governor, and people around the state unite behind a plan to pay our teachers a little bit more or a lot more. We're in an embarrassingly low level of teacher pay. Our teacher retention is not where we want it to be. Schools need repairs, they need capital improvements. So we're going to have to, at some point in time, make a big commitment to education if we're going to have the workforce that today's businesses need to either move here or to expand here.
And you were a big supporter of TUSD Superintendent H.T. Sanchez. He was forced out by the new majority on the TUSD board. Is that a disappointment to you?
Big disappointment, yeah. It's not just the disappointment of losing a wonderful school superintendent in H.T. Sanchez. If you look back, the average tenure of school superintendents over the last 20 years here in Tucson has been 2.5 years. So whether it's H.T. Sanchez or any other school superintendent, it's just for whatever reason, the position becomes way too politicized, and it's too uncomfortable for these qualified PhD holding executives to run a school district, and we've got to get past that.
What does the region really need to do to continue to thrive or do even better economically?
Yeah, I hope that the cooperation between the public sector and the private sector continues or even escalates. Those people who take kind of a purist approach to economic development, that it's only up to the private sector to grow the economy, are living in yesterday's dream world. We're competing against cities and regions and states all across the country and frankly around the world for jobs and for job creators. We can't go into that gunfight with a knife and expect to survive and to thrive. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we're all working together cooperatively to make sure that we're creating jobs and growing our local companies and being attractive to companies who might want to come to Tucson. We have beautiful weather. We did a poll here a couple of years ago. We asked local businesses what they like most about doing business in our area and what they like least. This was back in 2014, before the needle really started to move, in my opinion. And local businessmen said they like the weather and they like doing business with people from Southern Arizona, that we are just good people, we're good neighbors, and it's a joy to do business here in Southern Arizona. The two big knocks were the interface with the public sector that they thought rightfully could be grossly improved, and roads and infrastructure was almost in a tie with the perception of the public sector.
Well, we've got about a minute left, but you bring up the roads, the sales tax question before the city, the Metro Chamber has endorsed.
We have endorsed that.
And why should folks go out and vote for this?
Well, it depends on what kind of a community we want to have. The tax rate that the city is proposing brings us up to pretty much the norm for cities around the state of Arizona. So it's not like we're asking to be overtaxed here. We've just got to decide what kind of a community do we want. Do we want a community that has nice roads? You can't hide a bad road. So when companies come here to look at our community, to think about maybe going into business here or moving a division here as Caterpillar did, you can't hide bad roads. And so we've got to make sure that our infrastructure is up to speed. The fact that we have so many public safety vehicles and other capital improvements, bulletproof vests and so forth and so on, we need first-rate public safety here. So the Tucson Metro Chamber is solidly behind Prop 101.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but Mike Varney from the Tucson Metro Chamber, thank you so much for coming by.
My pleasure.
And that is our show for today. My thanks to our media partners at Tucson Weekly, Tucson Local Media, and Community Radio KXCI 91.3 FM, where a radio version of Zona Politics airs Sunday afternoons at 5 p.m. My thanks also to the gang here at Creative Tucson who have made our relaunch possible. If you want to check out the show online, you can find us at zonapolitics.com and creativetucson.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook. I'm Jim Ninsel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Zona Politics is hosted by Tucson Weekly senior writer Jim Ninsel. The program is produced by Jennifer Powers Murphy and Danny Vinnick and edited by Jim Rundle. Special thanks to KXCI, Tucson Weekly, Brink Creative Digital, and all supporters who provide crucial funding for the program. Learn more about Zona Politics at zonapolitics.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter